Right, good morning everybody, welcome. We should have a very interesting session for you today. My name is Pim van Baarsen, I'm CEO for the Silverstone Technology Cluster. So today we have a fascinating session led by Shai Karnam and featuring a number of our fantastic STC businesses talking about overcoming growth challenges. So maybe Shai, do you want to start proceedings and then we'll work out how we can bring John back in later on?
Sure, why not? Thank you.
Good
morning, everybody. Hopefully my bandwidth will remain stable for the duration of the session. By way of self-introduction, I'm just doing the bit that John, I think, was meant to be doing. We met regarding the whole sort of growth agenda at Barclays Eagle Labs. I was, until recently, professor at Cranfield School of Management, heading up the Bettany Center for Entrepreneurship. I'm now in a failed retirement project where I've been attempting to retire for the last year and a half. But life is just too exciting. And my role now is I'm mentoring 6 various deep tech startups. I run courses on this sort of stuff in countries ending with IA for some strange reason. Latvia, Lithuania, Austria, and so forth, where lots of good quality science and tech taking place. I've managed to invest in 2 or 3 of them myself, just to experience what wealth and poverty looks like in the same spiel. Now I'm absolutely delighted to be continuing my role as ambassador for Silverstone Technology Cluster and to be chairing this session. I believe we have orchestrated a great morning for you. We look at sort of early parts of the entrepreneurial journey. And we've got 2 companies who are going to talk to that topic. We have Chris Kirby and Paul North. And then we move on to kind of the later part of the journey, things going along. So the first part of the journey, typically that I've been seeing over the years, is you just need to prove that you exist, that your technology works, that your services are appropriate for customer need, they fulfill everything that the customer is looking for, and that you've established yourself some level of credibility in the marketplace. The second phase of growth is dominated by actually building a serious business model and serious company with employees that brings all its own challenges with it. And of course, the third and final part is, okay, we've grown big, and do we want to sustain this and keep going, or do we actually say, you know what, I'm done with this company, I want to make a nice tidy exit from here and maybe come back again, or theoretically at least try and retire to some island somewhere, maybe Isle of Wight or Bahamas or something like that. That doesn't often work for entrepreneurs. There's just too much inside them to want to try and do something. I've seen more failed retirement projects from entrepreneurs than I have from anywhere other scenario. So that's broadly it. So we have Chris Kirby and Paul North, Illuminis, Kieran Salter, Simon Dawson. Thank you very much, both of you, for doing the middle part. And then John Hilton, who will take us through the decisions he made regarding the exit. I understand this all sounds very academic without acknowledging the fact that we're in the middle of a blooming pandemic, right? With a government that seems indecisive and yet Churchillian at the same time. And then we've got the US election fiasco, and we have all sorts of stuff going on around us in the world. Economies in complete disarray. Bearing all that in mind, we still want to have maybe an hour or so where we have a kind of a beam me up Scotty scenario and go into Zoom and just have a conversation that just gives us a bit of fresh air and thinking time for other ideas. So with that brief intro, each of our pair of speakers, or first pair of speakers, about 7 or 8 minutes, Paul and Chris, please, just to give us your views on what the early days of a new venture looks like, and your thoughts on that as we had in the exchange of emails. And then I will flip over to Kieran and Simon. So Chris, do you want to kick us off? Because I think you're the slightly newer business, if I'm not mistaken, between you and Paul.
Yeah, I think so. So thanks, Shai, and good morning, everybody. So yeah, I'm Chris Kirby. I'm one of the founders of a company called Tomorrow's Journey. We're a technology business within the transport and mobility sector. I'll kind of get back to kind of what we're doing in a second, but just on a personal level, my background, I've worked in the automotive industry pretty much all of my career. Working mostly for car manufacturers and financial services businesses. I ran Jaguar Land Rover Financial Services in the UK for a while, and then also did some interesting stuff with Fiat. And kind of just before starting Tomorrow's Journey, I ran a digital marketing business, effectively running their automotive division, and we built some interesting technology products for Mercedes and VW and alike. And really that got us into looking at how transport was changing, how the market was going to be very different over the coming years. Not foreseeing a pandemic, but still seeing some changes in our sector. And we decided 3 years ago to start Tomorrow's Journey, and really our focus was about how the physical asset is used in transport and how actually they can be used better. So really the simple premise was that to move people and things, we need an asset, whether that's a car or a van or a truck. Autonomous vehicle, electric vehicle, electric scooter, flying taxi, it doesn't really matter. All of these things are physical assets. And actually in the emerging transport sector, kind of people had lost the focus on that a little bit, which is why a lot of the newer business models in the sector were getting people really excited and then typically failing because they don't make any money. So we built a platform that allows assets to be utilized by more than one service provider at the same time. So increasing those assets utility. And then over a period of the last sort of 2 years, we've really developed that software out to have a platform that is completely customizable to allow companies to launch new mobility and new transport models. So it's a completely flexible kind of advanced rental platform. Pretty much everything that's happening in the emerging transport sector is a form of rental. It's a form of kind of short-term vehicle access. The process that or the system that we have kind of allows those models to be introduced and scaled up really quickly. And we're working on some interesting projects with Ford, BP, BT Fleet, actually. The guys just emailed me, so I need to turn my emails off about some installation stuff we're doing tomorrow. And they're all really different use cases that we're serving, but essentially with the same technology level involved. In terms of some of the lessons we've learned, and I guess we'll get into some Q&As earlier, but definitely been reflecting a lot in the last kind of 6 months about how our journey's progressed. And I kind of split, we're kind of in year 3, and I sort of split. I talk about it as the volumes of the book of Tomorrow's Journey, like try and break everything down into chapters of the book, and each year is kind of a volume. And the first year definitely was the hype. We were a team coming from the transport sector ourselves, and we're like, hey, we've got this cool startup. We're doing some really interesting stuff that no one else is doing, and everyone was giving us awards and patting us on the back and telling us how great we were, which was great. Best 6-7 months of my career that was. And then we realized, well, we hadn't really done anything other than go to some events and talk about some stuff. So that was pretty good. We raised a little bit of money in that process. Definitely year 2 was the reality. Okay, right, so we spent some money, we've built some stuff. No one's really paying us for any of this yet. We're not quite sure we've established the market fit. We're trying to raise some more money, doesn't quite work. It's not as easy the second time round. The hype's worn off, stop winning awards, and you have to kind of start doing something. And really the year 3 for us, which sort of coincided with the pandemic and global uncertainty, we actually focused on, dare I say it, actually trying to drive revenue and actually onboard proper customers. So surprisingly to me, that seems to have worked. So actually in the last 6 months, we've doubled the size of our team. I have a new guy starting on Monday. It takes us to 6, and we'll have, by the end of the year, but actually probably by the end of October, 3 large commercial deals with blue chip businesses, which is really interesting. I think if it hadn't been for the pandemic, we probably wouldn't have done that, and I think I'd still be running around after VCs trying to get them to give me some money, which is, I think in our experience, a bit of a waste of time. We were raising money because we didn't have any, not because we had a need for it, or like we had a channel to direct it. So definitely some interesting learnings within that. I think also the thing for us, we were effectively starting off as a B2B marketplace, which is incredibly difficult to do if there isn't one that already exists. You can't make the business work without at least 2 other people being on the same page as you. And I think if we had had our time again, we would have started with something that we could sell directly to someone who would pay us for it, and then building out from there. Because getting in can we get 4 or 5 people all in the same place at the same time, all agreeing to do this thing commercially so we can make some money, proved again in hindsight, unsurprisingly, quite difficult. But if you have a product that you can say, hey, Mr. car dealership, do you want to buy this software? It's really good. It kind of is in your control. And I think we probably would have done it the other way around had we have known. So yeah, definitely some interesting stuff around that. I could talk about it all morning, but I know there's lots of other stuff going on. There'll be some questions later, but hopefully that's okay for an intro, Shai.
Yes, thank you, Chris, very much so. I mean, it's interesting that the two points I'd like to pick up on before handing over to Paul. One is about creating use cases early on. And I think it's really important to prove yourself that you're in the marketplace. And I think indeed driving revenues as early as you can, in fact, gives you better valuations if you are going to raise some venture capital and so forth.
Yeah. And they were all things I would point out. They're all things that people definitely told me. And when I went on to webinars and meetings, I heard and I went, no, that doesn't apply to us. But typically, you have to learn these things firsthand to recognise it. I don't think it's teaching anyone anything new, but it's when you look back, you go, what on earth was I doing for that 6 months when I was running around London trying to get VCs to invest in us? I didn't have anything investable. What a waste of time.
So much more glamorous to raise venture capital than it is to go make a sale, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also we in that time we did have like 3 offers from VCs, but they were horrible, like really, really bad. And again, not one for necessarily a forum like this, but I would always happily share with people, some of the terms that we got from some relatively big VCs who were supposed to be sort of supporting technology businesses in this sector were pretty horrible. And I think had we had a slightly different mindset, we might have taken those. And then 6 months down the line, the pandemic hits, we'd have lost our business now. And the reality is we've only really given sort of 15% of the company away to investors in our early stage. We've still got control and we're growing the business. So sort of by accident, I think we've ended up in a good place. But yeah, definitely the glamour of VC money was, it's not glamorous post event, I think.
Just one quick question before I hand over to Paul, not to oversimplify your business, but are you kind of like the Airbnb for cars?
Yeah, well, that's definitely where we started, and we were looking at that, but from a B2B perspective. So we were trying to connect fleet operators with people who are providing services. So the principle was that we could combine a number of fleets together, and different companies could access those fleets to provide services. So a company like Zipcar could use the vehicle in the morning, an Uber driver could access it in the afternoon, a Deliveroo driver could use it in the evening. It was that principle, and the system's built around that technology. But building a marketplace like that, a multi-sided B2B marketplace, is really difficult to do off the bat. So really now, I wouldn't say pivoted, but kind of directed in that actually we've got some software that allows companies to set up Zipcar type business models from that platform, so from that kind of flexible asset platform, and bringing in other people's fleets, and then potentially getting extra use for their fleet as well. So it's kind of a multifaceted piece, but that's the bit that makes it easier to sell to end users, because actually at least 2 of the projects that we're doing at the moment don't have any third parties involved. So we're just selling some software to a single end user, which is much easier than the marketplace.
Thank you, Chris. Paul, coming to you.
Thanks, Shai. Yeah, so I'm Paul North, founder of Illuminous Insight Software. So about the business, we work with smart and inquiring people who want to use every tool at their disposal to maximize the success of their business. What we've done is we've got a tailored analytics system that our clients give a dynamic route to into their business data, so that all their decisions get really clued up. Put it as simplest, we give our clients one-click insights into their business performance. That's what we're about. So personally, bizarrely, I was originally an analytical chemist, but started my life in the labs just as personal computers were coming to the world. Got very interested, and then following time in the labs and some time as a systems manager, became an independent IT consultant back in about 2002. Always really interested, particularly in data and databases. That's been something that's sort of followed through my career. As an IT consultant, probably 10 or a few years ago, had a client who was doing a monthly exercise of grabbing a load of data out of their Sage system, putting it into a variety of spreadsheets, and spending quite a lot of effort every month to send that out to their sales reps and understand what the business was doing. So I wrote them a very bespoke system that automated the daily extraction so it could happen every day rather than once a month, and a web app that enabled their staff to get to that data and interrogate it really quickly and easily. Just kind of a thing that came to me one afternoon as a solution to these horrible spreadsheets. Utterly transformed their business in about a fortnight. It was astonishing. I showed it to 3 of my other customers. They liked it too. And I basically copied and pasted that code set into a new place, changed the name on the top and tweaked a few things to give those other customers their bit, and ended up with 4 bespoke systems. So our kind of business idea, beginning of 2012, we were much slower burn than Chris's business, was to that there must be lots of businesses with that need of really getting into their business data, and particularly in the SME world. There's nothing available at the lower end of the marketplace. So we started thinking about what became Illuminis, and the innovation was to develop a core extracting and reporting system that we could really quickly and easily tailor to any individual customer without any need for bespoke coding. And that was what we set about developing in 2012. And by the autumn of that year, we had a working product. Our previous 4 what we call legacy customers had agreed to be beta people. So they'd all been using it for a couple of months, and we were happy to launch. I found a business partner who I thought had complementary skills to my technical skills. And we sent out 2,500 glossy invites to a launch demo event at Milton Keynes Stadium. And we had 2 responses, which was utterly unbelievable. We were just gutted, as you might imagine. Thankfully, we persuaded one of the responses to give him a demo, and he became our first customer and still is a customer to this day. But that really began a very slow growth of our products. We didn't go for any financing because, bluntly, we didn't know what to sell it, what we would spend it on even. We knew marketing was the issue. But what we quickly discovered was we were, in many ways, pretty unique in what we were doing. There were business intelligence tools, which is what we are for big business in the, in the 6-figure numbers, but nothing at the level we were doing. And we had a real education issue in terms of our marketplace. So we slowly grew to about 20 clients who are all absolutely chuffed with the product. We have great customer testimonials, but it was hard for us to grow the business. A couple of years ago, we did a course with Shai as part of the STC thing at Cranfield, the Growth Through Green project, which really gave us a chance to actually start looking at the business as a business and the potential looking at our value proposition and so on. And since then, we've really come to understand the business a great deal more. One of the things that we really do understand now is that we don't actually just sell software. We sell analytical expertise that goes with it, data analysts. We're pretty certain that the reason that there's just about nobody in our place in the marketplace is that analytics software requires analytic skill to make it work in your business. And for most SME businesses, that's something that's not available. For most SMEs, IT is about turning the lights on and keeping the disk drives empty. So we've realized, and I think last year on our turnover, probably 35% of our turnover was consultancy alongside the software licensing. Where we are now, we've grown slowly. We're at 3 full-time employees, 2 part-time contractors. This year was to be our big scale-up year, and we pushed some stuff ahead at the end of last year to really try and get really growing this year. And obviously with the COVID situation, that put pretty much a halt on marketing for new business. But we've remained stable. We've focused hard on helping our existing customers, who thankfully are all still running and all still with us. But we're working with a new business coach. We've got a new business plan in place. We are literally going to, this weekend, start with a lead generation agency, and we're expecting to basically double in the next 12 months our customer base. That's where we are now.
Thank you very much, Paul. Looks like you're fitting the textbook duration of how long it takes to feel like you're an established business, which is about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
As you said, the whole thing kick-started for you in 2012. So Chris Kirby, this is a health warning for you as well. But the fact that you're now building a business as opposed to just building a product.
Yeah, it's exactly where we've got to be. As you describe it, we have a well-proven product. You know, and we know that it's scalable. We're working in businesses turning over £1 million using Sage 50. And our last installation before the lockdown started was for 200 users in Delhi, New Delhi in India rather. So it's really proved to be very scalable.
Brilliant. Yeah. That's excellent news. Thank you very much, Paul. I know that we need to now move on. So the next sector, which is kind of the both deep advanced engineering companies, as distinct from the first two, which are more little software companies, is also interesting for me. And in my introductions that were made to me through Pim and Liz and the others, I got the impression that sometimes the companies that I went to see on the Silverstone Technology Cluster were the deep engineering companies with a passion for motorsport, or motorsport companies financing them through a bit of deep engineering. So this question that you raised, Paul, are we just a software company or analytics company, arose in the dozen or so firms that I met, thinking, so do we have clarity about the identity of our business proposition? So throwing that little googly in the direction of Kieran and Simon, could I invite Kieran maybe to kickstart us, and then we'll move on to Simon. You need to unmute.
I know, you'd think we'd be getting used to that by now, wouldn't you? Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and good to meet everyone today. Nice turnout. So I'll give you a bit of an introduction to the business for those of you who don't know, and I won't go on too much. But I thought I'd start with a bit of an analogy to where we are in our businesses, and it's interesting listening to the startup phase, because I really enjoyed that bit. I think that's the most enjoyable part about a business is the startup. And the analogy is they're a bit like children, really. When they're babies, they're really cute and easy to get on with, and a little bit of trouble. But it's quite good fun, and it's of course it's quite good fun, the whole build up to it, and then you've got a few years of joy and bliss, and then they turn into teenagers. And at the moment, well, in the last couple of years, I certainly feel that from my business point of view, in terms of running a business, it's a bit like looking after a smelly teenager that answers back a lot, and it's much more difficult and perhaps a little less fun at that stage. And I'm looking forward to the bit that sort of John's going to talk about later, about them leaving home and enjoying the rewards of having your space back again and maybe starting all over again. But so my business, and there's a couple of businesses that you're probably all familiar with, but KDB Special Projects is the main earner, if you like, in our portfolio at the moment. But I guess that working in the advanced engineering sector's been our main motivation, not building a business. We actually wanted to just do cool projects and cool things in engineering. And so KDB Special Projects was set up as a spin out from my motorsport business to really exploit all the technologies and all the things we'd learned in motorsport, and try and see whether there are other opportunities in the rest of industry. And it turns out there were, and we've been pretty successful. And since 2012, we built up to at its peak, a maximum a team. We had about 35 people, and a spread of projects across performance sports, industrial automation, additive manufacturing, motorsport, automotive, and that also led us into another journey, which was the Digital Manufacturing Centre, which we're launching next year. Well, we launched it now, but it'll be opening next year. And that's all around advanced engineering, advanced manufacturing, in specifically additive. And that's, I guess, my new startup at the moment, and that's the fun bit, getting that one established. But I think, as just to reflect on our business journey, I think we're one of those businesses that sort of the model is we kind of started it accidentally, and everything we've done a little bit is a bit accidental rather than sort of a deliberate, let's go out and start a business, what sort of business shall we do and how do we plan it. My career in owning businesses started when the business that I worked for went bust, so I had very few options other than either try and find a job or set something up. And along the way, our decision tree has probably been a bit like that. And I think in hindsight, we would have benefited from, if you want a lesson learned, we would have benefited from being more strategic, more planned from the beginning. We're that way now, and that's how the Digital Manufacturing Centre and other things have come about, because they're very strategic decisions. But at the beginning, we kind of muddled along a bit, and I think our growth would have happened more quickly if we'd had a deliberate plan. And in particular, I'm thinking about an exit plan. You know, you've got to think 10 years, maybe 15 years ahead if you're starting young. And I think also the other thing is that we, perhaps subconsciously, one of my measures of success and growth of the business was how many people we employed. You know, in reality, every day and every week, I looked at the bottom line and was measuring the business on our profit. And we've been very fortunate that, you know, listening to the venture capital comments earlier, you know, we're privately funded. We've built our business by reinvesting our profits and through sales. So we went out, we sold stuff, we made some money, we bought some more things, and we went out and sold more stuff. And you know, that our measure was profit in terms of being able to grow and reinvest. But I kind of subconsciously, I think, thought that, you know, success and the growth of the business, or the measure of a successful business, was how many people we employed. And of course, now post-COVID, that's changed, you know, and we're certainly, I'm more comfortable with the concept that actually we might be a smaller business in terms of people, but more profitable and more sustainable and better positioned to survive the challenges ahead of us. So I think those are some of my reflections on our journey. I don't yet know when I'll be sitting in my conservatory like John, enjoying the rewards of this, but that's the plan, you know, and we're working towards that plan. But I think another piece of advice would be, probably don't try and architect a business to do what you think's right. If you do what you know best, you'll probably be successful at it. And it may not, and don't measure your success and growth by what other people are doing and where you think you should be benchmarked against those others, because they're all different businesses with different objectives. So yeah, open to questions later on, Shai. I don't know whether that's the plan.
Yeah, thank you, Kieran. I think the thread I'm picking up from all three of you so far is that all your businesses started because of deep experience and expertise in a particular domain, right? Whether it's computers or it's engineering.
I mean, in particular, our business started through necessity, really. You know, I didn't give up a job to go and set up the business. I didn't take a big risk of walking away from something that I enjoyed. It was necessity. We'd been made redundant from a business that had sadly gone bust, and that's what drove us to create what we did. It was also opportunity, because that business left opportunities in its wake. You know, there were now customers that could be serviced by a new business, and you know, I know Simon and I started at the same time on that journey, and we've gone slightly different directions, but remained fairly close along the way. But yeah, I would say it was you know, not because of our expertise just facilitated it.
Yeah. So the academics have that as a push and pull entrepreneurship. I push, you get pushed into it because of circumstances. And the pull version is, you know, you have some kind of dream sitting around and you're thinking about it for a long time, and then eventually you make the jump. But I saw a similar phenomenon, Kieran, years ago, so post Thatcher. So you could guess by my grey hair that I've been around a bit. I saw all the East Midlands companies, so loads of them starting from exactly the point where the coal industries, the steel industries, etc., were absolutely being shut and squeezed and changed and so on. And there's a whole bunch of businesses, engineering companies, not as advanced as yours, but nonetheless engineering, selling back to the Rolls Royces of this world as subcontractors. So, and they did very well back in the day, but certainly there was no venture capital in the 80s and 90s to talk about. So nobody even thought about that in the way that Chris is thinking now. You know, there's just self-funded stuff, savings, borrowings, family, all of that, and of course customers. So
well, certainly everything we've done since has been pull, but definitely what we did at the beginning was push.
I'm interested in your metric that you talk about, you know, not using headcount as a measure of success anymore, but profits. I think that's probably a more sensible approach. Have you ever used acquisition of number of customers as or do you have a sense of, you know, we're growing because we're getting more and more customers as a metric?
No, I mean, subconsciously again, and intangibly, I sort of measure our success of what we're achieving by who those customers are, rather than the quantity of them. You know, we're very proud that we have a list of customers that normally are very difficult to get into and get involved with. And I think, you know, we've shortcut some of those processes with approval with some of those customers because of the offering we have, and they can't get it anywhere else. So it's more quality than quantity, and it's again not a measure of success. I mean, ultimately, the measure of success of the business is: are you achieving your the outputs that you set out to deliver to your customers, and are you making a profit from it? And that's really the final measure for us.
And I guess the fact that they're staying with you and allowing you to make a profit is suggesting that you're doing something right.
Yeah, as I say, it's we're experiencing difficult times now across every sector. But I think it's the longer you're involved in a business, the more of a journey it becomes, and the more of a roller coaster it is. I'm quite jealous of some of the people that sort of start a business and exit it quite quickly because they feel that you haven't had to suffer too much of the pain of a downturn and things. But
okay, cool. Thanks, Kieran. I better move on to Simon, I think, to not take up your airtime. Simon, do you want to introduce your perspective on this?
Yeah, so my name's Simon Dowson, Managing Director of a company called Delta Motorsport. As Kieran mentioned, we kind of started out from the same place, and over the last sort of 15 plus years, we've been growing grey and weary together and having a little grumble like a couple of old men every now and again about what it's like to run or grow a business. So as the name suggests, we started off as a motorsport-based business, and similar to Kieran, it was more around, that was what we knew. We saw opportunity there, and that happened for us back in sort of 2005. But then we were fortunate to pick up a project which was around sort of a low carbon agenda. So where a client of ours was getting some government subsidies for looking at hydrogen in vehicle technology. And we thought, okay, well, that's obviously a route that the government want to go to. So maybe we should have a look at it ourselves in order to create a sustainable business, because motorsport is very cyclic. It's full of people that are willing to rip, or quite happy to rip you off. So we didn't really want to be in that. We wanted to look slightly further on and have some engineering excitement as well, whereas motorsport was starting to get a little bit stale from one make stuff. So what do we do? We're engineers, myself and my business partner who started the business. We wanted some excitement. And let's have a look at who's doing stuff in electric vehicles or in low carbon vehicles. And so we decided we'd start by jumping in and designing our own car from scratch, and use that as a way to highlight the business in a different sector. So we looked around at how do we get subsidies to help us with that, and we picked up a regional development agency grant in order to carry on this work. We'd done some analysis about what the market looked like, and there was sort of very little happening in there, both from a systems perspective and up to a vehicle level. So, we did think about it. There was an element of luck in there as well, but we did have a think about, okay, well, this is a good future path for us. But we didn't necessarily expect it to take so long for people to wake up to the fact that, oh, maybe we should be doing this stuff. So, we ended up with a grant from the Technology Strategy Board, which is Innovate UK now, to finish building the cars and get them out there. And it was really those that were our calling cars, and that happened back in sort of 2010, 2011. But as you can imagine, back then people were still thinking about milk floats and what's all this, it's a load of rubbish. So it's only really over the last probably 5 years where people have really took note, and that's really come from obviously changes in legislation. So the business now, we do nothing in motorsport other than actually provide technology. So we provide battery systems for Cosworth for one of their products going into a British Touring Car Championship. And that's, it's a little bit of a shame because we love the motorsport side of things, the excitement of it, but we also like getting paid for the work that we do. So we have to think about how the business grows and where it goes into. So we have really diversified over the years. And then over the last few, we've narrowed back down to actually we need to look at some core streams of technology, because we were trying to sell too much almost. People, it was too confusing for people. You know, oh, these guys, they do everything from a widget up to a full car. It doesn't make any sense. And when you're trying to deal with some of the big automotive guys, they don't really get it, how a small team can do that when they have thousands and thousands of people to do it. So we've really narrowed back down to saying, well, we specialize in design and build of battery systems. They're normally high power systems. We provide support around electrification. So that's general powertrain integration, systems integration, and we specialize then on the control side of things. So obviously with electric vehicles, you've got a lot of control over a lot of the components, and you can utilize that to your advantage. But it's been similar to what Kieran described in terms of some routes have been planned, and that's a route that we need to go for the business. And other routes have been very much based on, okay, let's have a little look at this and see what opportunities arise from it. And then it suddenly springs itself into a new stream that you never even thought about really. As an engineer, really, you follow a path thinking, oh, this looks interesting, and then suddenly that can blossom. But equally, you go down a few dead ends as well in that process. And we've been fortunate to benefit from quite a few grants, and we use those grants as a way to facilitate introductions to some of the bigger businesses. So if you're dealing with, say, a big automotive manufacturer, for little old Delta to turn up on their doorstep and say, oh, we can provide you some support doing whatever, it's quite hard. Whereas if you go through and are able to partner up with these people in a collaborative research and development project, it gives them an opportunity to learn about the value of your business and understand where you can add to theirs at a low risk level for them. And then you end up commercializing that thereafter into opportunities with that customer. It also is a way that, you know, a lot of people in this sector, they struggle to be able to find anything that can market, because all of their customers are all confidential and all of the products they develop are all confidential. So the collaborative R&D stuff is a way for you to actually say, look, this is us, this is what we can do, this is what we've delivered, because it's all out in the public domain. So, you know, it is a challenge, you know, a massive challenge to try and get into those routes of government funding. But if you do get the opportunity, then we'd very much recommend it. One thing that we did do, and giving a little shout out to Barclays here, is we changed our banking. Again, probably over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, where our previous bank, we didn't really feel understood our industry. So although we've been very much like Kieran and self-funded and not required the bank's support, we wanted to know that if we wanted support, that the bank that we were with understood what it actually is that we do. And then Barclays being around the technology cluster, and certainly our business development manager that we have, he's very familiar with the area that we work in, takes time to understand it. So we found that a good asset for us, and obviously Barclays being involved in things like this is a good opportunity for us to get in as well off the back of it. So so that's been very useful. Yeah, we I like Kieran's analogy of teenagers. I have teenagers at home and a business similar at work as well. And we're now, you know, we're sort of just under 50 people.
Right.
I used to know everything about what we did and all parts of the job. And then probably 4 or 5 years ago, I started interviewing people for things I didn't even realize were a job. and job titles and had no idea. And so we're trying to learn and adapt to what we need as a business as we grow. But it's very much that transition. And obviously what we're trying to highlight today is the people's journey. And we kind of went through the early stages, building the business based on, similar to Kieran, you know, you do a piece of work, you reinvest, you look at the next opportunity, you go again, without necessarily the foresight as to when does it end. And then as you get further on, you start looking at, okay, now we need to look at when it does end for us, because we don't have the skills to take the business on to the next stage. You know, we're principally a business of engineers. So we're looking at when the next opportunity comes to partner or to get investment in the business to allow it to grow further. Not only for our own benefit, but also for the people that work here as well. Not get caught sort of stuck in the middle of a business that isn't small, but it isn't big. So it's too expensive to win small projects, and it's not recognized enough, or doesn't have a big enough balance sheet to win the really big programs. So you're caught in that kind of market. But it's you know, we try and do stuff that we enjoy, to at least make sure that when we get up and come to work in the morning, which we all used to do, then we still want to do it. And we're still very much at that stage. We're still driven by the excitement of what we're doing and the engineering challenges that are put in front of us.
Simon, thank you very much for that. I just two quick points. One is, and what are your metrics for success? Kieran had headcount, and now it's profits largely, and a sense of, you know, a reputation with excellent customers. What are your kind of measures?
So I've always ran the business on cash. So
Nice.
Cash, really.
Cash is king. Yes.
You know, I just measure it simply on, you know, how well have we done at the end of the year, basically.
Okay.
And obviously there's a reputation thing, similar to what Kieran said. If you can win work from big customers, then you must be doing something right. But it's still got to stack up at the end of the day. It's still got to make money.
Yeah. So the other thing, of course, is it sounds to me like you're moving from cash to balance sheet, because you're now thinking about the exit kind of, you know, just sensing that. You said something there that I'd just like to just throw in the pot, saying you thought you didn't have the skills to grow the business to the next level, and therefore you might want to make an exit. I would just ask you to maybe just reflect on that, because everyone's got the skills. It's about whether you want to do it and whether you can build a team around yourself that can do it. Because I've seen first-time entrepreneurs taking their businesses to $1 billion or £1 billion valuation, not necessarily in Silicon Valley, actually in the city I live in Cambridge. And you'd think they wouldn't have the skill set to do it. So everyone's got that. It's whether you want to do it or not. You know, you might just say, you know what, I've done with the smelly teenager stage, thank you very much. I now need to have the empty nest feeling. So that's a different motivation. But I wouldn't ever say that people don't necessarily have the skills, as long as they're open to learning. And I remember speaking to a fellow called Jamie Urquhart, who was a sales director at ARM, long before they got sold to SoftBank and all the rest of it. And I asked him with my little notebook, saying, Jamie, what would you like to have learned before you got into business? Because he was a physicist, an engineer, then suddenly became sales director of ARM. And his reply to me was, I wish I'd learned to learn, because I've been changing roles every 3 or 4 years, and all I'm constantly doing is learning. Like now we're all learning how to work with Zoom, right? And you're ahead of the game 10, 15 years ago. A friend of mine started a company called PodPoint, which sold to EDF for 100 million recently. And, you know, they took a long time between getting their electrical chargers. I'm sure you know the company with that. And so you're ahead of the curve again. So you just have to figure it out, I guess.
Yeah, and it's, you know, how best to exploit that, really. That's the area that I'm saying we're less experienced in, really, on how we exploit where we're at today.
Yeah. And Pod Point was also started by a couple of petrol heads, that did something first, and then they made some money on that, and then they made a lot more money with Pod Point. And I think they had exit in their mind when they got going on this. So maybe another time over another Zoom coffee or something. Yeah. Let's move on to John Hilton, who everyone is aspiring to be like.
That's very kind of you, Shai. So thank you very much. And I'm sure I've met quite a few of you before, but as it said in the documentation that you saw before the thing, I used to work in Formula One. I started and ran the Flybrid business at Silverstone for 7 years before I sold it, and then I worked for the new owner for a few years, and then I retired. And so, just like Shay, I'm also a failed retirement project because I'm now back out of retirement and acting as managing director for a company called Lunaz Design based in Silverstone, who build beautiful classic cars and convert them to electric. So this is it's a new business. It's just less than 2 years old, but we're already 25 people, and we've got huge plans. And we think we're going to be £250 million in 2026, and 500 people. And that's the picture we see, and we believe it's going to come true. And I can't see it not coming true, honestly. Got my head around it so much, and my goodness, is it easier the second time round? So I would like to talk about the last part of the thing about selling, and the first thing I'd like to say about that is, before you can think about selling, you've got to get everything in order first. So you've got to make sure that your business is running properly, everything is properly set up, you haven't got any skeletons hidden in any closets, because during the sale process they will find them. You need to make sure all your intellectual property is genuinely secure, in the name of the company, not in the name of the people who invented it, not in the name of the inventor, in the name of the business, because that's what you're selling. You need to make sure all your staff contracts are properly done. You need to make sure, particularly the intellectual property clauses are right, that you really own all the things your employees invented, that you really do own all the things that contractors pay. You paid contractors to invent. If your contract with them doesn't say you own it, they own it. These things will get found. You need them properly done. You need your supply relationships tied up properly. A lot of smaller businesses, they have unusual relationships with suppliers. Maybe your brother owns the paint shop that paints your cars. You need a contract. You need proper paperwork. You need a promise for him to keep selling you these services at the same price to the new owner. If you send me 20 cars a year, I'll paint them for 10 grand each, or whatever the deal is. You need it written down. You need a piece of paper. You need rental agreements sorted, especially maybe you own your own business premises. You need a rental agreement between you and the business. All the I's and T's dotted and crossed, arm's length rental agreement, arm's length pricing, and all of that stuff. Ideally, you would have long-term contracts with your customers tied up too, so that you can say, well, I've got this work coming. You can value this stream of activity out into next year or beyond. That's particularly valuable. You need to agree a proper long-term plan for where you think the business is going, even after you've gone. You need to say, here's what the next 5-6 years look like. This is how big I think it can be. And it ought to be, an optimistic view of where it might get to, on the larger side of where you think you might get to, but believable and supportable. And you must be able to say, I really think it can be this big for all of these reasons. And you might think about making a change to the company name or the company structure. It struck me, I only added that note when Simon was talking. I wonder if Delta Motorsport's the right name for a business that's really, Delta Battery Systems or Delta Electronics Consultancy, or maybe it's two businesses. Maybe it's Delta Battery Systems and Delta Consultants. These things can help position your company better and kind of separate it from you in a way that feels like it's a thing that runs on its own, which brings me to the next bit, which is you need to prove it can run without you. Because if Simon sells Delta and Simon lands a big lump of money and disappears to the Bahamas, how does this business keep running? Who does his job? How does that work? So from quite a long way out, ideally, I think you need at least 18 months before you sell to have put in place your replacement, and to get them up to speed, to, you know, really get them to a place where they can run it and then test it. Go and have a 3-month sabbatical and tour around Australia or something and see if it runs without you. If you can prove it runs without you, it's much more sellable. But also, if it runs without you, when you come back and you say, do you know, this is still working fine, maybe you don't want to sell it. Maybe you can just, you know, go and live in the Bahamas and take the profit. And if you feel that you could do that, then you won't be pushed into selling it for a low price. You know, you're in the right place to sell it. You don't genuinely don't care if you sell it or not. You can become really happy with that place. Then I'd say, when you come to sell, you know, why are you selling? What's the story behind the sale? Are you retiring? Are you coming to a place where the business needs a lot of investment and you didn't have the money? That was the reason why we sold Flybridge. You know, we came to a point where we were just going to start production. We didn't have the money to invest in production lines, and this was the reason we went out looking for someone. Actually, initially looking for investment, but ended up finding somebody who wanted to buy the whole business. So you need to show, if you're looking for investment, what you want the money for. If you're looking for a sale, why. And maybe the people you sell to have got some ulterior reason for buying you. Maybe they already use your services. Maybe they're your biggest customer. Maybe they can fill the whole of your factory with work just for themselves, and they don't mind that you're retiring and they don't have a salesperson anymore. Maybe that doesn't matter to them. So the most obvious question people ask is price. You know, how much is my business worth? Well, there's a lot of people ask that, and I guess the honest answer is what you're willing to sell it for and what the buyer's willing to pay. There are valuation methods like 1 times turnover or 10 times profit are useful to give you a guide. I've certainly seen businesses sell for retirement purposes, people who are genuinely, you know, at or near retirement age, who sold for as little as 3 to 5 times annual profit plus the value of the assets on the books, you know, which makes a pretty attractive investment for the new buyer, but likely then they've got to work out how to make it run without this person there. You don't want to set the price too low, it just makes it look suspicious. It's also pretty hard to sell things quite cheaply. There is a lot of work that needs to be done to buy a business. You know, the due diligence process is complicated and expensive and time consuming, and there's almost as much work to do it properly for a business that you sell for £1 or £2 million as there is one you sell for 20 million or 200 million. So, you know, actually not so easy to sell them that, you know, cheap is not necessarily easier to sell. At Flybrid, we did manage to get 40 times our best year of profit, which was a fantastic result. But we were very much selling a promise of what was coming tomorrow. And of course, that ended up being reflected in a purchase price that was a mixture of cash today and cash tomorrow. The cash, and they said, well, if those things you say are going to come true in the future do come true, then we'll pay you more money. And as the seller, don't bet your house on receiving that. You know, I know a lot of people who've been on earn-out type arrangements, and I don't know many who've been paid all of it. I know one, but I don't know many who've been paid all of it. So, you know, the lump of money you get up front as the first payment is the only bit you can be absolutely sure you're going to get at all. Then, through the sale process, the buyer is going to ask you to provide what they call representations and warranties, reps and warranties. And what this means is a promise to the buyer that everything you told them when you were trying to sell it was true, and a warranty that that your business is capable of being run the way you used to run it. And so the classic one that's really tricky is freedom to operate. So, for example, they'll say to you, are you able to build and sell electric battery packs? Prove to me you haven't infringed anybody else's intellectual property when you build these and sell them, and that there won't be a load of claims that turn up after I've bought this business of people saying, oh, you've been infringing my IP for 10 years. Now, proving a negative is extraordinarily difficult. And so all of those warranties and representations end up being quite a difficult and divisive part of the sale process. And in our case, for example, we were on the hook for the whole sale price, millions and millions of pounds, for 3 years after sale, and that ends up being quite scary. And so you can do a thing that's called warranty insurance. You can buy an insurance policy to insure this risk. It's a really weird type of insurance. You can't tell anybody you've got it. You pay a premium that is of the order of 1% of the insured sum, and if you ever tell the person you're selling to that you have it, it's immediately invalid. So it's a really, really strange insurance. But it does enable you to sit there going absolutely steadfastly, no, I insist you don't have a claim, and and swearing blind that you're in the right all the way to the end, knowing there's somebody there to back you up, but you can't tell anybody there's somebody there to back you up. It's rather weird. And the last thing I'd mention is agents who will help you sell your business. You will find that there are lots and lots of different people out there who would love to try and help you sell your company. And I really don't like that business at all. I have helped people sell their businesses, and I've been paid a very small amount of money for doing that. I've only helped friends, really. I particularly don't like paying a percentage of the sale price. I don't see why. It's a job like any other. It deserves an hourly rate. If you can't find somebody who'll do it on an hourly rate, turn the bugger off, I think. I didn't do it. In fact, we found our buyer ourselves. We didn't pay anybody a commission. The only people we paid were our legal team, and we paid them a lot of money, about £180,000, I should think. We did pretty well. We sold it quite cheaply, and so I'd be very careful with the agents thing, because they're a tricky bunch, and they can take a huge amount of money for doing next to nothing. They're going to leave you to solve all the problems anyway. They won't actually help you fix those problems, mostly. Okay, so...
Thank you very much, John. Before I hand back to Pim, just a couple of points I wanted to pick up on. One is, clearly you have had to think about a succession plan to show how the business will continue, which kind of means revealing your hand a little bit to the senior team about what it does. And then that presumably then, will cascade its way through to the rest of the company, because it's almost impossible to stop that. So how did you deal with that? Because there's a motivational issue of people thinking, this is going to be sold.
Right. So, what we did at Flybrid, we got to a point, we would have been about 14, 15 months before we signed the first stage deal. And we took our most senior person in each of the bits of the company, senior designer, senior development engineer, business development guy, and we said, look, we're going to promote all of you to director level, if you like. So you're going to become the chief engineer, and you're going to have to run the whole of the engineering bit, and you're going to be in charge of business development, and you're running the whole of that. Because Doug and I are going to go out and look for investment, is what we told them. We said we're going to go and look for money to fund the next stage of our growth, because we have to build a factory to manufacture these things in scale, and we don't have enough money. And so we told them we were going to look for money, and we said, we think this is a long and complicated process. We think we need to spend a significant amount of time out of the business, and you need to give us the space to do that by you taking over all the day-to-day running. And so that's what we did. And we went and found investment, but in fact, the investor said, we'll only invest if we can later buy. And we did a deal with them where we said, they've got a right to buy it for the next 12 months. And they were a limited company. They had to, a public limited company. They had to go to the shareholders for permission to do this deal. So we agreed all of the terms of the sale as well. We got the investment, and then we told the workforce, okay, we have got the investment, but we've also done this, and we'll be selling in 9 months' time or whatever.
Yeah.
And that sale did go through.
Yeah, excellent. I remember seeing a printing company in London many years ago where they put on their notice board, the intention of the board of this company is to build the company up for sale. And you can see the motivation going straight down the toilet. 150 workers at there. But yeah, that's a very interesting way of dealing with it, actually, that you're looking for growth and growth funding, and then the outcome is the outcome, and that hangs the motivation together for the company.
Yeah.
Super. Tim, I'm conscious the clock is ticking away against us, even on Zoom time. So let me hand back to you to maybe orchestrate some of the Q&A towards a terrific panel. Thank you guys very much for what you've done. I've certainly enjoyed being out of retirement for the past hour or so.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Shai. Much appreciated. So we'd like to open it up for Q&A. I mean, may I ask you all to use the chat functionality to pose any questions you might have. Obviously, we've got Shai here, we've got some of the fantastic panelists here. So, you know, if you have any questions or any comments, if you could use the chat functionality at the bottom of your screen. If you mouse over, you'll find the option there for chat, and just post whatever you want to ask. One of the things that I would like to ask, just to kick things off, I think, you know, maybe Kieran, Simon, and John are the targets for this, because, you know, in Kieran's and Simon's situation, it's kind of like, you know, your job disappears, so you kind of like, do I get a proper job? Do I start my own thing? And all that sort of stuff. And then you set up on your journey, but you know, at what point or to what extent do you kind of go, right, you know, I'm going to start my business, I'm going to have a go at it for 15 years, 20 years, 10 years, whatever it is, build it up to a value of X, and then I'll sell. You know, do you map that out right from the start and then try to achieve that? And how easy is that? And is that something that you want to do? And maybe, Shai, you could comment on this. Or is it something, well, actually, it's better to first build it up to a certain level and then see if there's opportunities there? Or do you wait to see what happens? You know, John, I mean, did you set out to kind of go like, right, we're going to do this for 10 years and then sell? Or how did you approach that?
So the Flywheel business, we are actually our first business meeting was with a chap whose job description was exit strategy planner, and we said to him, here's where we'd like to get to. This is how much money. I said to him, I think this is how much money I need to retire in the way to which I'd like to be accustomed. And so, what does a business look like that would sell for this much money? What do we have to have? You know, how big is it? How much profits you have to make? What does it look like? And he told us, and we set out to try and build that. And we got it done and sold it in 7 years, which was pretty good, really. The Lunaz business is even more like that. I mean, the Lunaz business, we've got a properly steep growth curve planned. The people who, I'm only a minority shareholder, the people who are funding it are bold young men, you know, 32 years old is the oldest. And they're putting a lot of money in, and they're on a really, really aggressive growth plan, and I think we can do it. They absolutely are going in thinking, I want this to be, they'd like it to be $1 billion. I think that's a little steep. I think £250 million is where I think we can get to by 2026. So yeah, we're doing it with our eyes open, knowing where we're trying to go.
Excellent, very, very interesting. I mean, Kieran and Simon, how have you guys approached this? Because do you wait to the stage where it all turns into a smelly teenager for you then to go, I don't want to deal with this smelly teenager, let's sell it, or how do you go about that?
From my point of view, I mean, when I set out back in 2002, when Raynor went bust, you know, I was pretty naive to what I was getting into, and certainly wasn't very astute as a business person. I was an engineer that, frankly, just wanted to make a living and enjoy what I was doing, and I wanted to kind of do what I was still doing at Raynor, but that had been taken away from me. So I sort of set up to do my own thing, and it was really easy to do. And it was, you know, I'll tell you how that journey worked out, because, you know, it started off as a lifestyle business, as I've just described, just looking after myself and you know, offices from home, which was new then. We just had the internet and things like that. But, you know, I was working from home, and it was very deliberately a low overhead cost model of just making as much profit for myself to live on, really. And did that for quite a few years. And it was only in 2012 when we conceived the idea of setting up KW Special Projects, which was very deliberately, as I described at the time, sort of setting up a grown-up business, which was actually intended on investing in people, in IP, in facilities and premises, and actually making a very conscious decision to set up a business. Whereas beforehand with KW Motorsport, it wasn't a conscious decision to set up a business. It was a way of making a living. And that journey took us 7-8 years to do that, and it was really again circumstances that led us to make that decision. There were two things going on. I mean, firstly, as Simon said, the motorsport business was and even then was fairly volatile and not easy necessarily to consistently make money out of. We were very lucky in the Le Mans era of privateers, where we had long-term business doing engineering and car design. But that was, we could see the end to that coming. I was getting a bit fed up with working from home because I had some real life children to worry about now, and they were getting noisy and getting in the way. So it was a very sort of conscious, and also, circumstance of a project coming along, a bit like Simon said with his electric cars. Ours was in industrial inkjet, where we had an opportunity to fund that startup. So that was our reasons for doing it. It was still a little bit accidental, and kind of waited for the opportunity to come our way rather than a deliberate sit down, decide what we're going to go and do it.
Yeah, and for me, it was similar to Kieran. After Reynard, I set up with a couple of other guys from Reynard, and then ended up working down in London for a year at a design consultancy before Nick Carpenter and I started Delta. So I'd had a bit of experience about possibly where I wanted to get to, but it was still around initially, well, I enjoy doing this, so let's see how far we can take doing something that you enjoy. It's, and that, I think that's really important, to be honest, to start with. You need to earn money, obviously, but you need to enjoy it because it's going to be hard work. I always viewed it as, well, I can go and work for somebody else whenever I want, if I want to do that. So, but yeah, starting up was a bit of a no-brainer, really.
You can always get a proper job later, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
And there's a question here about metrics regarding.
Yeah, I was just about to come to that. Thanks, James. Very good question. So the question is, when considering matrices, does anyone use revenue or profit per employee? And he follows that up with, as a lot of the focus now is about work-life balance, and obviously with COVID and working from home and all that sort of stuff, I think it's brought much more to the fore to, what can we do to make sure our employees are as profitable and productive as positive. So does anybody look at those things in those ways? Does anybody have a comment on that?
So at the moment in the Lunes business, we're counting the number of cars we've got in build at any one time as our metric for growth. And that's really because we're not actually trying to make money at the moment. We're running around banging stakes in the ground in the Wild West, trying to stake out the biggest piece of land we can, whilst that phase is still underway. Trying to make sure we're the supplier of choice of a huge range of marques and different types of vehicle. So we're trying to launch as many different models and things as we can at the moment, and get as many cars as we can into build. And we know we're not losing money on them, but we know how we're going to make money on them in the future, but we're not doing that yet.
Actually, maybe some of Paul's systems might be useful for that. Paul, over to you, because you.
Yeah, because we are, we recognise that we're very much, consultancy is a big part of our business too. We actually have the metric kind of the other way around, that we're working on a metric of how many customers one individual data analyst that we employ can work with. So very much part of our growth plans are looking at the number of customers we achieve against, therefore, the number of people we need to support them. So that's a metric that's really important to us.
Excellent. There was actually another, so I take it, Kieran and Simon and Chris, have you considered doing a profit or revenue per employee? ratio?
I think from our side again, because we've been relatively early, probably more similar to Paul. We actually ours we tend to look at kind of financial runway. So like how much cash have we got in the bank, or kind of a agreed, committed. How long does that allow us to last for with the team? And then if we put, like, we've got a new developer starting on Monday, if you put a 75 grand a year cost in that, how much shorter does it make it? And basically, how scared are we of that date? So when it was, I don't know, September, and then you drop the new developer in and it becomes March, and you go, that's okay. And we go, can we afford another developer? And it becomes December, and you go, no, that's too tight for me. I don't like it. Because we're in a position where, although we've got some recurring revenue, we're getting a lot of startup like project costs. So big chunks of money to kind of initiate the projects, and we can't be sure of what the ongoing revenue is going to be for each project until they fully go live, because we're license fee based on a per vehicle going through the platform. So one of the projects we're working on, they're trying to get 100 vehicles by the end of the year, but they're saying 2,000 by the end of next year. Well, if it's 2,000 by the end of next year, it's 20 grand a month. That's great. But if it's not, we're a bit knackered if we've hired the people for that. So yeah, it's a runway thing for us at the moment, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly look at the value of each of our employees. So we're looking at their cost and what they're delivering. We don't look at necessarily too much on an individual level. It's more scaled up to the business level as to what we can deliver as a group. But we're pretty hard on looking out to make sure each person is actually adding value to the business proposition.
Tim, can I just add to the question, if I may?
Yes.
I run a business, Maziak Compressors. So we're predominantly a service. We don't do any manufacturing at all. We're importing our compressors from Germany, and our drying and filtration equipment is manufactured up in the northeast. So we have field-based service engineers, and we measure them on their efficiencies and their downtime and their non-chargeable hours. From a sales point of view, we measure them on their GP against their direct cost to make sure they're making contributions to the overheads. But at a very high level, and this was the purpose of the question, there are many ways to consider what success looks like. We've been going 30 years and we employ 45 people. And success to me as the shareholder has always been about profit. But I'm now reaching a stage in my career where it's about quality of life. And I don't know whether that's a warning sign for me and all my employees, or it's a good thing where I can relinquish some of that responsibility and step back and allow some new blood to take it in a different, new, energized direction. But for me, it is about quality of life. And I think to engage with our staff, it's about ensuring that they have quality of life. And throughout all our engagement surveys with our staff, this is becoming more and more of a regular feedback that it's about quality, not about quantity. It's not about the money so much anymore. It's about what they can do with that money in their time. And it's always a driver for me to try and get the staff to engage with the business. And to a certain extent, I insist on their engagement during their contracted hours. But I said, look, if we're having a social event or whatever, it's your time. You can do as you want. And that's your time to be with your family. So it's really trying to understand how we as a business can energize our people in delivering for them what they want, which is that work-life balance, and not so much about the money or the profit anymore.
Yeah, I think, can I jump in, Pim?
Yes, please do.
Certainly there is a very big shift when I meet hundreds of young aspiring entrepreneurs, and there's definitely a shift in society, and Kieran and Simon, your smelly teenagers might be reflecting this more than I can, which is that they're not really looking pure for that sort of 1980s yuppie, give me 100,000 kind of approach to life anymore. They're looking to, can they have a meaningful venture of some kind? And they're being influenced by things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And they're not necessarily looking purely for the sort of shareholder value approach to life. And we've seen that, I suppose, partly because we've seen this huge gap growing between the haves and the have-nots, and the concentration of wealth. And they're young, they can see this thing for themselves. And happily for us, the young, although they might be smelly, they have some level of idealism as well. It'll just take time for them to become cynical like us. It's not a problem. They will reach our level of hesitation. But in the meantime, I think you're right. There is a difference going on, and And not just anecdotal, you can see that right across. You can see that in all sorts of media coverage. And I think it's interesting that the way we're moving away from profit contribution per employee kind of mentality to saying, what difference are we going to make to the planet? What are we doing to our companies, our families, our lives? And the lockdown has also, I think, woken them up a little bit to what really matters, because they're suddenly not been able to have a hug with their grandma or something, and they're feeling it. I think you're right to pick up on that trend. And I don't know that we have all the answers yet, except capitalism will continue as the dominant economic force, but maybe it'll come back with more of a human face to it by the time we're done with the COVID pandemic.
I can also imagine that if you put things in place properly in that regard, it actually enhances the productivity of your employees, and ultimately that makes your business sort of more profitable and more sellable, right? So it's a fact to consider.
So it's the 1960s, and Kieran, I see you've unmuted, so I'll give it to you in a moment. There's a fellow called Maslow who came up with his Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? You've probably all seen it in some workshop or other, that you go from the basic of having to fill your belly up, and then you get to the top and you think, what's the meaning of life type of thing. And James, that might be where you've reached. So Kieran, over to you.
Yeah, no, on that, money is obviously not a motivator. I think we all know that it doesn't. You can't just motivate your employees by paying them more. But I think just to go back simply on the question, ultimately the business has to be profitable in order to employ those people. So you do have to have that kind of metric and measure whether your quantity of employees and what they're delivering and what their productivity is allowing the business to be sustainable. And you can't just focus on kind of the quality of life issue, because if the business can't be sustainable, then those people won't have jobs. But we don't, just to say from our point of view, we don't have an exact science or exact measure of that. And it sounds a bit corny, but as a team, your group of people have to be delivering a profit back to the business, and that's how we look at it.
Excellent. I just wanted to catch up on another question that was asked by Rob, and maybe this is something for each of you to take in turn, because it'll be quite an interesting insight, I feel. The question is, did any of the panelists ever consider angel funding initially? And if not, why not? I mean, Chris, do you want to kick off? Because you're obviously running around trying to get VC funding.
Yeah, well, I think we were, but definitely learnt the lesson. It's probably not the streets paved with gold that it's made out to be. Definitely, we had angel funding in the early stages, so we raised some initial capital from some industry people, also from friends and family. That was the best bit of advice I had as a starter. I need to go and raise some money, and someone said to me, "Oh well, if the people around you don't believe in you, then people you don't know certainly aren't going to believe in you, especially when you've just got an idea and 10 PowerPoint slides." So that definitely helped us through the initial phases. I think probably we could have raised a little bit more and then worried less about the VC thing later. And I do think it's not a bad way to get started. And I think, as I've said a few times, I think the VC stuff is massively overrated. Huge time draw. I was doing some analysis at the start of lockdown. I think I was actually going back to do some stuff with our CRM, and I just went back through my meetings for the last 6 months of going, oh, did I meet with somebody who was interesting that I never followed up with or whatever? And I just realized for the last sort of 6 months, last 4 months of last year, 2 months of this year, like 70% of my meetings were trying to raise investment, and it was just a huge waste of time. That it's very easy for those types of businesses to say, oh, we like that idea, can you send me some more information? I've got this question, I've got that question, I've got this question, I've got another question. I usually be sitting up till midnight answering quite stupid questions from VCs who then go, oh yeah, great, well it's a bit early for us, and it's a real time draw. But angel investment, I think, is interesting for the starting point, and then it's raising money for a purpose, I think, is the thing that I learned more, not just because you don't have any, which I think is what a lot of startups do. My bank balance is low, who will give me some more money? It's not a good reason.
Chris, do you think it's because of the economic climate where most VCs are currently supporting their existing investments rather than putting in new money into new companies? Or are you just finding the whole VC thing, irrespective of the pandemic, a bit fraught?
Yeah, I think it was definitely most of that activity was pre-pandemic. So pretty much, actually, that's what I think. When we was making my introduction, that was one of the things that changed the direction of the business for us, because we went, well, we know we can't raise VC funding now in this current climate. We're going to have to get someone to actually pay us for doing something, which was it's an interesting change. So no, I think I found particularly in this sector, and I guess it's a lot in the kind of growth tech sectors, mobility is a big one. There's lots of early stage VCs who are specifically looking to back this sector. There's also a lot of companies in that space. I think a lot of the stuff that I learned as well is thinking about how many companies those VCs actually back per year. So if you're thinking about how many meetings they're taking, there are 4 or 5 analysts, like lower level analysts, who are taking 10 meetings a week. They probably only fund 8 companies a year. So you've got to think about like that pool that you have to go through, and that churn. And we were on a couple of really good accelerator programs, but the problem with those is they give you exposure to VCs, so you then have to pitch to 100 of them. And yeah, I think it's about trying to find your fit. So yeah, I think actually I haven't seen VCs in our sector stopping funding businesses. I've seen lots of newer rounds being announced for new funding for good companies. So I don't think that's particularly changed.
Paul, do you have any comments on angel funding? Is that something you looked at?
Yeah, I think it's in the very early stages, we deliberately decided not to go through anything like that, because it's the point that Chris just made. We didn't know what we would spend it on. I think if I had my time again, one of the things that I would have done was spent some money right at the beginning on getting some advice on what we might spend it on to drive the business quicker, because we were fundamentally a tech guy. And somebody else who had some sales and marketing expertise, but not really in terms of building a new business. And I think so. In essence, we funded the business personally to start with. I was still a consultant working the other half of the week in my old business, and funding it that way. So it is about what are you going to spend it on? We just didn't know.
Fair enough, excellent. I mean, Kieran and Simon, you both commented that obviously your companies are sort of self-financed. Kieran, did you consider angel finance, and if not, why not?
Well, I don't know about Simon, but the only reason ours was self-financed was because I didn't draw a salary for a very long time. So we were the angel fund. That's what makes us the shareholders, isn't it? That's what makes us we're the angel funders. No, we didn't consider going externally. I didn't want to be answerable to anyone else, if I'm honest. That was the main issue.
And from my side, we were fortunate to win some good projects straight off the bat, so we didn't need to. And then off the back of those projects where we'd made some money, then we could look at, okay, where do we go now? What do we do next?
And find the place to spend it, like Paul was saying as well.
Yeah.
John, have you considered angel finance? Is it something that you...
in the Flybook business, we didn't do any of that. But in the Lunas business, David, my CEO, brought in 2 people who provided the seed funding for the business, and who then followed that with more money. And they're private individuals. It's a private investment, and they've been absolutely fantastic. And I've been surprised by that, both with the ease with which David gets more money, literally at the drop of a hat, as far as I can see, and by how little influence they want. We do a board meeting thing quarterly, but really they have no influence at all. And David did manage to hold on to a decent shareholding himself, despite them putting in a very large sum of money. So, all up, I would have thought it would be more disruptive than it appears to be. And it's got us a long way, actually. They've been fantastic. So but I think you have to know them. You need a personal connection to at least one. In our case, David had a personal connection to one of them, and he brought the other one. The 2 angels are friends, if you like. So, yeah, the personal connection thing appeared very important.
And do they know the industry, John?
No, absolutely not. So we're in the car business. One of them owns a hotel chain. One of them's an art dealer. Don't know.
Yeah, I think I was just, sorry, Pim, on that as well. I was going to pick up on the same point with kind of on the back of Kieran's point as well about control. That's definitely a thing that I found as a benefit from the angel funding. Definitely backing what John said. Everybody who's invested knows us in one way, shape, or form. Our biggest investor is a guy who I think tried to hire me about 4 different times during my career. Subsequently sold his business and now is an investor and kind of acts as a sounding board for me. And again, the same thing. If I need more money, he's sort of there in the background to support. But actually, none of our investors have any real say in the running of the business. One acts as our chairman, but he's a really respected industry guy. And he's more of an advocate for us. And that's a lot of the reasons why we turned down the 3 VC offers we had last year, because they all wanted not just control over business decisions, but even like over investment decisions, but, you know, commercial decisions as well. You know, they wanted to sign off every commercial deal. They wanted to sign off any future investment. They wanted, you know, seat on the board and controlling stake and all that kind of stuff. And we sort of said, you know, same thing as Kieran saying, like, that's not why we did this. You know, maybe later, maybe when we're 200 people and we've, you know, bigger board and everything else, that's fine. But at this stage, that wasn't something that we wanted to do. So angel investors are a good route to go down if you're still looking to keep control in those early stages, I would say, from our experience. And definitely reiterating what John said around, you know, they're relatively hands-off, relatively easy to get money, but the personal connection is important, I think.
Yeah, so it can be quite beneficial, but you definitely need to go in with your eyes open and
Sure.
make sure you know what you're doing. I mean, maybe Shai, you can comment on that as well, because, you know, undoubtedly you're exposed to quite a lot of that sort of stuff, and presumably there's really great examples out there, but presumably there's also some horror stories. Is there maybe some insights that you could share with us on?
Yeah, they're currently involved. They're currently involved in my capacity as a non-exec in one of the companies, and we are in the funding round. Partly because we're selling to the oil and gas sector, the customer acquisition times are very, very long, especially at the moment. This is about securing the physical assets. So they do need to digitize. So all the market cases there, the customer needs there, everything's there. It's just people away on furlough and all sorts of other things. The decisions are even longer than normal. So we do have an offer on the table, and there are probably 2 sticking points. But the main one is actually about the special reserved matters. Who makes a call on the reserved matters? There's about 7 or 8 items where the inbound venture capitalists say they want to have maybe not the final say, but they want to have a very strong say on about 7 or 8 things. One of which is about board appointments. One is about senior executive hires. These are fairly standard terms, I suspect, and John's nodding away there, so you've seen those before. But the one that's really was a red line for one of my colleagues was the board composition. So the inbound VC, the draft term sheets had that there would be a maximum of 5 on the board, right? And which, for example, I've seen in another company in which I'm a minor business angel investor, is that they caved in too early, in my opinion. And the board now consists of the 2 founding directors and 4 VCs, venture capitalists. I mean, what value add are those 4 VCs, with the greatest respect to their, you know, MBAs and everything else, can they possibly bring to that business? And in order to get the money to fund themselves, they caved in on the desire to have the terms. That's one really have to be careful for. They don't have an independent non-exec on their board. I'm not upset because they don't have me. I'm not upset that they don't have one. And they don't have a chairman on the company to pour oil on troubled waters. You know, sometimes things get a bit difficult. You just need somebody up there that can act as an umpire/referee when the time comes, right? Umpire I see as stabilizing, referee I see as sometimes punching back and shouting back. So they don't have that. This company, on the other hand, happily, we've got somebody who's done 2 exits before, one on AIM, one on NASDAQ, and is an extremely wise individual. Coincidentally, also a petrol head. Classic cars, John, is a matter of interest. And he knows how to talk to the VCs. So although the founding team can get a bit emotional from time to time, and why not? Because that's their passion. He can then calm things down and take their perspective to the inbound, I have to say, a really extremely blue chip venture capital source, and to try and negotiate the deal. So I think in that particular case, if you are going for that kind of money, you need to have, dare I say, the big gorilla on your side, right? somebody who's been there and done it before, who can actually calmly put things across. One of our team got very het up about the valuation. Who doesn't? Because they thought all their efforts were not being rewarded. I'm on the REMCOM, so we sort of did a deal which would calm them down, because we don't want to say no to this particular deal, because apart from the valuation, access to markets is enormous. So that's the upside. So I'd rather have 1% of a very, very large company than 100% of diddly squat, right? But getting that message over sometimes. So yeah, I've been playing the role of coach, mentor, referee, investor, all that, and it's absolutely fascinating world in which to live. But you do have to buy into the basic concept of capitalism if you're going to go down that route. You can't be a socialist on that level and worry about equity and fairness and all this other crap, right? This is just dog eat dog stuff.
Excellent.
You might have seen the news item where Herman Hauser, who was the founder of Acorn Computers, which transitioned into ARM, doing an interview on Sky, I think all the way from New Zealand, saying how upset he was that ARM was being sold first to SoftBank and now on to NVIDIA, and how terrible this would be, and Monopolies Commission to come and step in. But sorry, Amadeus Capital Partners, his VC firm, is a significant investor. So either go for shareholder value or you don't. So I think Herman is partly right and partly not right in that. So yeah, there's a lot of issues that arise from this.
Very, very interesting. I mean, if anybody has any questions, please, again, use the chat functionality and let's keep it going in. I'd quite like to pick up on something that Simon mentioned. And Simon, if you wouldn't mind commenting on that, because, you know, we see it a lot where companies scale up, and you mentioned it very specifically, where, you know, all of a sudden you need to employ people about things that you don't know about, and you know, you get to a stage where you need to bring in skills that aren't necessarily sort of native to yourself. How do you, I mean, Simon, how have you dealt with that? And how do you deal with that? You know, are there people that you can call to for assistance, or how have you tackled that? And what's the best way to go about that? Because I should imagine that a number of people on this call might be in a similar situation.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to start somewhere, really. You've got to put your trust in somebody, and take your, I guess, your own feeling from when you're talking with them, whether you think they can deliver what you need them to. And obviously you need to be quite specific about what that actually is. It's not an easy transition, to be honest. And I think it gets even harder in some areas. You know, we've had lots of instances with people who say they can support us around business development, for instance, but they don't really understand your business. They don't take the time to understand it. They don't represent it in the way that you want them to. So we end up doing most of it ourselves. But then when you've got technical skills and jobs that involve technical skills, it's quite easy to measure them about the output that you're expecting. But you've kind of got to go on that journey a little bit, and then, like I say, put your trust in somebody, and then from that you take a bit of learning, and then you go, okay, well, next time I might do that differently, or actually now I've seen that, I need to do this. But it is hard, you know, and I think it's the hardest probably when you're taking people on that are what I would class as overhead rather than, you know, productive labour, because that becomes an even bigger, I guess, a part risk, or you feel a bigger risk to start with. As to where they're adding value, but you know, it is part of growing up and building the appropriate team that you need for the business. So, you know, as John highlighted, the thing can run on its own without necessarily having you a massive cog in the wheel, and that's something that we've worked hard to do, to make sure we've got a senior management team that knows more than us about a lot of areas, so they can deal with the running of the business.
And to what extent, you know, because there's always going to be an element of not knowing what you don't know. So how do you identify, you know, because it might be that if you let it run on to the point where all of a sudden you're going to go, oh Jesus, we need somebody like that. You know, is there steps that you can take to anticipate that need? perhaps, and how to propel you forward? Because it must be quite difficult to get engaged with areas that you're not necessarily an expert in, and therefore identify the need when it's there. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean,
maybe some of the other panelists can comment on that.
for us, just quickly, for us, a lot of it comes from our dealings with our customers. So as those customers grow in size, their requirements grow as well. So you've got to decide what's appropriate for you and your scale of business for you to be able to deliver to them. And some of the things, you say, okay, well, we should be incorporating that as a process or a technology across everything. And other things you just say, well, that's not us, that's not our business. But yeah, for us, it was governed around what our customers actually wanted.
Kieran, do you have a similar?
Well, I can echo what Simon was saying mostly. I think from my personal experience, the bit that became most difficult actually and challenging in scale up is when you go from a small team of people that you've hand selected and quite possibly have gravitated towards you and your style of business and what you want to do, and everyone understanding the needs and the objectives of the business, to then employing people that just want a job. And that's really difficult because they don't fit our model, people that just want jobs. And so we want everyone to be kind of going to bed in a KWSP t-shirt, and of course they're not. And so that was a challenge, and also retaining people is really difficult when you get to that scale, because they are literally just looking for a job, and if they get offered a bit more money or a slightly more interesting opportunity, or they kind of don't like the team they're working in, they flee. So that's difficult with scale up, because you're building a company based on people. You need those people to run the business, as John said, when you're not there. But how do you retain them? How do you keep them? And more importantly, how do you get them to think like you do? And I think it's also very easy for us as kind of either risk takers or the lazy individuals that chose to set up a business rather than getting a proper job, to think that everybody thinks like you, and they don't. They really don't, and that's quite a challenge to overcome. I'm not trained as a people person, and people that know me probably think I'm not a very good people person. They'd be accurate. I struggle with those issues and those difficulties. I want everyone to think like me, and of course they just don't. It's difficult.
I'd admit to that too. I mean, we made our first employee recruitment 2 years ago. It was a big decision that we agonised long and hard over. Went to a specialised recruitment agency, so they did all the pre-stuff before. One of the things I was really worried from other things I'd seen in other businesses I'd worked with were people coming in who had a CV full of all the skills, and then it turned out they didn't have them. So we actually introduced a technical test as part of the recruitment process. So I wrote some data analyst SQL requirements for people to fill in before we'd even interview them. So at least we knew they were doing the right thing. The first guy we recruited sat in front of us and told us this was his absolute dream job, that he really wanted to join a company just like ours, and that he could really see himself being part of our team and helping to grow our business in the way we wanted to grow it. And I sacked him 3 weeks later because he just didn't turn up every day. Just unbelievable. So we've now got a guy that's been with us 2 years who is brilliant, absolute part of the team, but they're hard to spot.
Yeah.
And trial and error is a factor, I'm sure. John, did you have any?
Yeah, I was going to say, I really like the idea of promoting from within wherever you can and trying to find your people that way. And indeed, when you're small, everybody has to do a lot of different jobs. And you find that, somebody is becoming overwhelmed, and you say, well, right, let's split that thing you're doing into two, and I need somebody to do that bit, and someone, you can keep doing this bit, and I'll recruit somebody just to, to fill that new role. And wherever we can, we try and do that by taking on young people. I like grads straight out of university. I don't mind training them. I don't mind spending money on CAD courses, and get them set up, because I really agree with Kieran about you'd like them to go to bed wearing your t-shirt. Well, you kind of can if you're their first job, and they grow up with you and your culture and your hours and the way you work. You can make them like you, or largely, and so we like to do that to try and fill in under the existing staff with young people. And as they come up, just a couple of years later, you'll be splitting them in half and filling underneath them again. And in our build shop, We had 2 guys in last year who started building cars as number 2s for somebody else, and this year they've both been made number 1s, and they've both got some, you know, a new number 2 underneath them. And I mean, we're struggling with that classic skills thing. We're still doing woodwork inside the cars and all sorts of interesting, you know, panel beating skills and things, welding, you know. So we're having to teach these, you know, young apprentices. We've got apprentices, we've got people who went through the Bicester Heritage training course and things like that as well. I like take them young, grow them inside, make them do lots of different jobs, and then find out what they're good at, and, you know, and split them off and you know, and grow that area around them if you find the right one.
Yeah, I agree. As you know, John, we're very keen on promoting young people at KWSP and bringing graduates on. And I like taking that risk, and I want to give people opportunities, particularly the graduates. You just got to make sure you've got the right balance of grown-ups around them to support them as well. And but I agree. I mean, we've got probably, well, 3 of our graduates that are working full-time with us now came through as placement students years before and have come back, and that's really good. Sorry, Pim, I'm afraid I'm going to have to bail out. As I said, I might right at the beginning, but really, really interesting conversation, and please don't stop because I'm not here.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Kieran.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And I just add a point on the training front.
Please.
We've always believed in training, particularly our field service engineers, and I always look at apprentices like a bonsai. You know, you can train and manipulate them to a certain extent at that age. And whenever we've recruited engineers from our field, because they're not happy at where they are, they end up being not happy when they're with us also, because they come with their own issues. So training and promotion and the youth, I think, for me, has always been a driver. We've just recently created through our own trade association apprenticeship scheme for compressed air engineers. Whether we'll actually get the uptake, whether that's a sexy industry for the young to join, you know, it's like John with his woodworking. You know, he may have a skill shortage there because it's not what the kids want to do. They want to tap keys and do their own thing and make apps. But again, growing your own skill and is, for us, has always been the strength of our business, hugely so.
Excellent. Thank you. Were there any other questions or comments from anybody that they want to do? I mean, I'm conscious that we're nearing 12 o'clock anyway, and so we could wrap it up. But I just want to make sure that, you know, now we have all of these people in the room and you've got the opportunity to engage with them, that you do. So does anybody else have any questions or comments that they want to make? Or no? Right. Shai, do you want to share any final?
Yes, just if it's okay. So we talked about scale up just a few moments ago, and quite rightly, about how do you scale up the talent. One of the things that with wearing my quasi-academic hat, you'll be aware, we did a lot of work which resulted in a book with a colorful title, Camels, Tigers and Unicorns, which then has resulted in something more practical later on called the Scale Up Manual. And this harks back to the metric question that came up earlier about what is a measure of success. And it kind of links back to what John was saying also about the intention of growing to a 250 million plus company. It's actually one of the things that we found that was unifying was understanding the total number of customers, potential customers out there for your business, right? If it's just one, i.e. Rolls-Royce, or one Ministry of Defense, well, that's one thing. But even within Rolls-Royce, there might be 20 or 30 departments as potential customers for you. So understanding that, and yes, there is a bit of a value judgment to make, but if you know the total number of customers out there that are reachable for you, I don't mean in business school, total addressable market, and there's actually number of customers out there available to you in B2B or in B2 consumers or B2 government number agencies and so on, then you can measure your progress against how many of those customers have you secured, have you actually talked to, who's on your database of customers that you could be addressing. And then this then comes back to how long will it take you to get to, if you like, C max, i.e. the maximum number of customers that you can reach over a given period of time. So if, as in John's business, you've given yourself, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, and you've got, you know, we're going for land grab with the number of cars that we make, that underneath it has an implication that, I don't know, some people may have fleets of 20 or 30 cars that they want to convert because they have a mini motor museum of their own, Are they converting all of them? Well, that's one customer with 20 quid is fantastic. But then say, how many customers are there in the big wide world out there that we can look at? I would encourage the businesses that are listening in to maybe first of all analyze what was their customer acquisition rate over the last few years since they started their companies. How many customers have they got now? What's the churn of customers? Don't worry about the dollar value or the profit margins, but just look purely at the number of customers that you've got and what's the total number of customers you can address. And then you get a feeling of whether or not you're actually big fish or little fish in that marketplace. And that's, I think, perhaps you can reach out to Paul North to analyze that for you. But nonetheless, I would encourage that as a metric going forward, because right now, with the pandemic, we're either going to hemorrhage customers or we're going to acquire customers. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to result in revenues and profits for us. So that, I think, is the metric. Maybe John and Paul can, and you, Piss. John Hilton, do you have any thoughts?
So I didn't quite catch your question there, breaking up just a little bit.
Sorry, yeah.
So did someone else catch the question that I could relay?
It was breaking up a little bit. Shai, could you repeat?
No.
Oh, sorry about that. Oh, okay. Just a question well, more a statement saying encourage people to look at customer acquisition, customer numbers, look historically, and then look at the total number of customers you might have out there.
Yeah. Yes, I did hear that part of the discussion. So no, I completely agree with that. So I think you need to know how big the market size is. You need to know, how many. In our case, our vehicles are quite expensive. We can get to a pretty big company without selling, selling hundreds, but not selling tens of thousands. And for sure, we've got clients who will take, fleets, for example. I think I mentioned one of our investors is a hotelier. We've got hotel chains who will take fleets of 10 or 20 cars at a time. And this is, at 350 grand each, it's a lot of money. So, there certainly are places where you can see, big chunks of turnover can come out of various different markets. And, but I agree completely. You need to be, in your growth plan, alongside your cash flow forecast, you need to show where these numbers are coming from. What percentage of the market share really is this? Which particular markets do you think you can exploit? And which things you think are for later? If you've identified other expansion opportunities into marine or aerospace or whatever it might be, but you're not doing them yet, you can put them on the list too, can't you? But you need to back up certainly the cash flow forecast out to 2026 for us. It's got real numbers in it. People ask us all the time, how are you going to find that many donor cars? Actually, really not that hard. We're picking popular models where there were thousands and we only need a few hundred. But yeah, you will get asked questions about the whole of the plan and where all the numbers really came from.
Yeah, excellent. Okay.
Right, thank you all very much for that. I'm kind of conscious of time, so I think we'll wrap it up there. What I would like to do, as we usually do, is I'd like to run a quick poll for people just to get some feedback on what you thought of the event today, but also to give us some idea on what else you would like us to cover, because this is part of our business growth series. So you should have a poll up on screen at the moment. So please, it takes about 40 seconds to fill in if you could do that. So in the meantime, I'll thank our audience on YouTube for watching. So thank you very much for watching. Please obviously check out our other videos, and do please check out our website as well for upcoming events similar to these. So thank you very much for watching, and see you again soon, hopefully.